The leather guest chair in Linda Morrison's office felt like a trap. I shifted uncomfortably, watching my old friend command the room from behind her imposing mahogany desk, so different from the giggling teenager I remembered from our high school days. The golden afternoon light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows caught the subtle highlights in her perfectly styled hair, creating an almost angelic halo effect that seemed at odds with the steel in her eyes. "Come on, Melissa," Linda said, her practiced smile never quite reaching those eyes. "You know how these profile pieces work. We give you the standard tour, show off our charitable initiatives, maybe throw in an exclusive about our expansion plans. Everyone wins." She gestured expansively at the framed magazine covers adorning her office walls, each featuring glowing articles about Morrison Enterprises. I gripped my recorder tighter, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. "That's not the kind of journalism I do anymore, Linda. The Chronicle gave me carte blanche on this one. Your family business has quadrupled in size over the past 5 years while your competitors are struggling. People want to know the real story." Something flickered across Linda's face, fear. Anger. Before her mask of corporate confidence slipped back into place. "Real story? There's no mystery here. Just good old-fashioned business acumen and hard work. Dad taught me everything I know." The mention of Richard Morrison sent a chill down my spine. I remembered him from our teenage years, a towering figure who always seemed to be watching, calculating, even during innocent pool parties and sleepovers. There had been rumors back then, whispers about questionable deals and vanishing competitors, but nothing ever stuck. "Speaking of your father," I ventured carefully, "I'd love to include his perspective. Is he still involved in day-to-day operations?" Linda's perfectly manicured nails drummed once, sharply, against her desk. "Dad's semi-retired now. Consulting role only. You know how it is, can't quite let go of his baby." She stood abruptly, smoothing her designer suit. "Let me show you our new R&D facility. The innovations we're developing there will make fascinating copy for your readers." I remained seated, my journalistic instincts screaming that I was onto something. "Linda, we've known each other for 20 years. If there's anything sensitive that needs to be handled carefully, you can trust me." She froze halfway to the door, her back to me. When she spoke, her voice had lost its polished edge, revealing something raw underneath. "There were dark times, Melissa. Times better left in the past. For everyone's sake." She turned, and for a moment I glimpsed the vulnerable girl I'd once shared secrets with at midnight slumber parties. "Please. Some doors shouldn't be opened." The weight of unspoken history hung heavy between us. I thought of the Chronicle's editor, salivating at the prospect of exposing corporate corruption. I thought of my struggling career, desperately needing a breakthrough piece. But mostly, I thought of Linda's eyes when she mentioned her father, that flash of something that looked terrifyingly like trapped desperation. "I'm not here to hurt you or the company," I said softly. "But if something's wrong..." "Nothing's wrong." The words exploded from her with unexpected force. She took a deep breath, visibly composing herself. "I'm sorry. It's been a long day. Why don't we reschedule the tour for tomorrow? I'll have my assistant send you our latest press kit." As security escorted me through the gleaming lobby, my mind raced. Linda's reaction had confirmed my suspicions. There was definitely a story here, probably bigger than I'd initially imagined. But pursuing it would mean potentially destroying a friendship that had survived 2 decades. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Josh, my colleague at the Chronicle, "Got something interesting from my contact at the SEC, call me ASAP." I stared at the message, then looked back at the towering Morrison Enterprises building, its windows blazing gold in the setting sun. Linda's words echoed in my head, "Some doors shouldn't be opened." But I'd never been very good at leaving doors closed. The truth has a way of burning through your fingers, no matter how desperately you try to contain it. I sat in my dimly lit home office, staring at the documents Josh had sent over, each page another ember in a fire I couldn't extinguish. My coffee had grown cold, forgotten hours ago when I first began unraveling the carefully constructed facade of Morrison Enterprises. "It's all there," Josh's voice crackled through my speaker phone, tight with suppressed excitement. "The SEC investigation from 12 years ago. Richard Morrison was looking at serious time, wire fraud, embezzlement, the works. Then suddenly, poof. Case closed, all evidence sealed." My eyes traced the grainy photograph included in the file, Richard Morrison on the courthouse steps, his arm protectively around a younger Linda. She looked shell-shocked, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, mascara smeared beneath her eyes. I remembered that time now, how Linda had withdrawn from our friend group, claiming family issues. We'd all assumed it was typical teenage drama. "There's more," Josh continued, his typing audible in the background. "3 of the key witnesses in the case. All coincidentally relocated overseas within months. Generous job offers they couldn't refuse. The lead investigator suddenly retired to a beach house in Maui. And the prosecutor's kid got a full ride to Harvard." The implications twisted in my gut like a knife. They bought their way out. Bought, threatened, or both. But here's the kicker, I've been tracking similar patterns in recent years. Competitors mysteriously backing out of deals. Whistleblowers changing their stories. It's the same playbook, just better hidden. I glanced at the photo on my desk, Linda and me at our high school graduation, arms around each other, futures bright and unblemished. The memory of yesterday's conversation echoed, some doors shouldn't be opened. Now I understood why. "Linda's protecting him," I murmured, the realization spreading like ice through my veins. "She has to know. She's been cleaning up his messes all this time." "Question is," Josh replied, "is she a willing participant or another victim?" The question haunted me as I drove to Morrison Enterprises the next morning. The gleaming corporate headquarters looked different now, less like a monument to success and more like a fortress hiding ugly truths. Security waved me through, Linda's assistant escorting me to the executive floor for our scheduled tour. Linda greeted me with practiced warmth, but I saw the shadows under her expertly applied concealer, the slight tremor in her hands as she gestured toward the R&D department. Every smile, every rehearsed comment about innovation and growth, it all felt like watching a performance I could finally see through. "Actually," I interrupted as she launched into another corporate spiel, "I'd like to talk about 2013. The color drained from her face. Around us, employees bustled through the hallway, oblivious to the moment of devastating recognition passing between us. "My office. Now." Her voice was barely above a whisper. The walk back felt like a funeral march. As soon as her office door clicked shut, Linda's professional demeanor crumbled. "You promised you wouldn't dig." "I promised I wouldn't hurt you," I corrected. "That's why I'm here, talking to you first. Help me understand, Linda. What really happened?" She sank into her chair, suddenly looking very young and very tired. "You have no idea what he's capable of. What he'll do to protect this company. Then help me expose him. We can dash." "No." The word exploded from her with such force that I flinched. "You don't get it, do you? He owns me. Every promotion, every achievement, it's all built on his foundation of lies. I try to run things legally now, but he's always there, always pushing for more. If this gets out, I lose everything. My career, my reputation, my freedom." "You're already losing your soul," I said softly. "I can see it eating you alive." Her laugh was bitter, brittle. "My soul? I sold that a long time ago, Melissa. The day I walked into that courtroom and lied under oath to save him. I was 19, terrified, and he." She trailed off, hands clenching. "Get out. If you pursue this, our friendship is over. And that will be the least of your worries." Is that a threat? No. She met my eyes, and the depth of fear I saw there chilled me to the bone. It's a warning. From someone who used to be your friend. She pressed a button on her desk. Security will escort you out. As the guards led me away, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, back off the Morrison story. Final warning. I should have been frightened. Instead, I felt a surge of cold determination. Linda might have surrendered to her father's darkness, but I wouldn't. The truth deserved to be told, no matter the cost. Walking to my car, I dialed Josh. Get me everything you can on Richard Morrison's current operations. Bank records, shell companies, everything. You sure about this? These people play rough. I watched the sun glint off Morrison Enterprises' windows, thinking of the scared teenage girl in that courthouse photograph. Someone has to stop him. Even if it means losing everything. Betrayal leaves fingerprints on the soul, invisible marks that reshape who we are, what we believe, how we move through the world. In the days following my confrontation with Linda, I felt those impressions deepening, hardening into something that both terrified and empowered me. The scared, uncertain journalist who'd walked into Morrison Enterprises was dissolving, replaced by someone harder, someone willing to burn bridges to reach truth. Josh's research consumed my dining room table, sprawling across the mahogany surface like an accusation. Each document, each connection, each suspicious transaction formed another piece of a mosaic I couldn't stop assembling, even as it threatened to cut me. My coffee went cold beside scattered photos of Richard Morrison at charity galas, his practiced smile never quite concealing the predator beneath. You're playing with fire, Josh warned during our late-night strategy session, his voice rough with concern. These people don't just break careers, they break lives. I traced the rim of my wine glass, watching shadows dance across the wall. I used to think journalism was about facts, about cold, hard truth. But this is about souls, Josh. About how corruption spreads like cancer, eating away at everything it touches. The warning text messages had continued, growing more explicit in their threats. My car had been followed twice. But each attempt at intimidation only crystallized my resolve, transforming fear into a kind of bitter fuel. Linda called at midnight, her voice stripped of its corporate polish. Why are you doing this? She demanded. Is it revenge? Are you punishing me for succeeding where you struggled? The accusation scraped against my conscience, forcing me to examine my own motivations. Was there a part of me that resented her meteoric rise, her seemingly perfect life? Perhaps. But beneath that lay something deeper, more fundamental. I'm doing this because someone has to, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Because every time your father breaks another law, destroys another life, a piece of you dies with it. I can hear it in your voice, Linda. See it in your eyes. Her laugh was a broken thing, jagged with pain. You always thought you could save everyone, Melissa. The eternal crusader. But some people don't want to be saved. Or maybe they're too scared to try. Silence stretched between us, heavy with 2 decades of friendship teetering on the edge of an abyss. Finally, she spoke again, her words barely a whisper. He has proof, you know. Of what I did in the courtroom. The lies I told. One word from him and I lose everything. He's holding you hostage with your own guilt. It's not just guilt. The sudden vehemence in her voice made me flinch. There are other things, darker things. Things I've helped cover up because I had no choice. He made sure of that, step by step, year by year. Every compromise drawing me deeper until I couldn't see the surface anymore. Understanding bloomed like a bruise. Linda wasn't just a victim or a collaborator, she was both, trapped in a web of her father's design, each struggle only entangling her further. Help me, I urged softly. Together we can dash. Goodbye, Melissa. The line went dead. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, letting the weight of her words settle around me. On my laptop screen, an email from Josh glowed with urgency. Found something big. Current operations. Money laundering through overseas subsidiaries. Linda's signature on everything. My throat tightened. By signing those documents, Linda had sealed her own fate. Whether she was protecting her father or protecting herself no longer mattered, she was legally complicit. The realization struck me with physical force: I couldn't save my friend and expose the truth. The very evidence that would bring down Richard Morrison would destroy Linda too. The choice loomed before me like a moral chasm: friendship or justice, loyalty or truth. Rain began to fall outside, drumming against my windows in a rhythm that matched my racing thoughts. I opened my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The story was there, waiting to be written. But what story? A tale of corporate corruption and greed? Or something more complex, more human, a story about how evil spreads not through grand gestures but through small compromises, about how it traps people not with chains but with choices. My phone buzzed again, another warning text, this time with photos. Me, entering my apartment. At the grocery store. Getting coffee. The message was clear: they were watching, waiting. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt an odd sense of clarity, as if fear had burned away everything non-essential, leaving only pure purpose behind. I began to type, the words flowing like a confession. The truth about Morrison Enterprises isn't hidden in offshore accounts or shell companies. It lives in the spaces between choices, in the moments when good people decide that survival matters more than integrity. This is a story about power, not just the power to build empires, but the power to corrupt souls. The cursor blinked, waiting. Once I filed this story, there would be no going back. No way to repair what would break. The rain fell harder, and somewhere in the city, I imagined Linda sitting in her perfect office, haunted by the weight of all she'd lost. Sometimes saving someone means destroying the cage they've built around themselves, even if they've forgotten how to live without its bars. Truth arrives like a blade, precise, merciless, transformative in its cut. The documents Josh laid before me in the Chronicle's darkened conference room carved away the last vestiges of doubt, leaving only the raw certainty of betrayal. Each spreadsheet, each transaction record, each damning email thread illuminated the vast architecture of corruption that Richard Morrison had built, with Linda as his willing architect. It goes deeper than we thought, Josh said, his voice tight with barely contained urgency. The overseas subsidiaries are just the surface. They've been systematically destroying smaller companies, forcing distressed sales, then laundering the assets through a network of shell corporations. Linda's signature is on everything, not just as a witness, but as an active participant. The weight of revelation pressed against my chest like a stone. In my mind's eye, I saw Linda at 17, laughing as we shared dreams of changing the world. Now here she was at 37, her fingerprints all over a criminal empire's machinery. The transformation was both shocking and somehow inevitable, like watching a time-lapse of corruption's slow poison working through a soul. There's more, Josh continued, sliding another folder across the polished table. We found connections to several mysterious deaths. Former employees who were about to talk. Journalists who asked too many questions. His eyes met mine, heavy with concern. Melissa, these people don't just break laws, they break lives. The threat should have terrified me. Instead, I felt an odd sense of clarity, as if fear had burned away everything non-essential, leaving behind something harder, more resolute. Show me everything. Hours blurred into a relentless parade of evidence. My phone buzzed repeatedly, Linda's name flashing on the screen like a wound I couldn't bring myself to touch. Finally, as midnight painted the city in shadows, I answered. "You're going to get yourself killed," she hissed, her voice stripped of its corporate polish, raw with something between rage and terror. "Funny, it sounds like you care. I thought that part of you died in that courtroom 12 years ago. You sanctimonious bitch. The words carried the weight of decades, of shared secrets turned to weapons, of trust corrupted by ambition. You think you understand what it takes to survive in this world? To build something lasting? Every empire is built on bones, Melissa. At least I'm honest about the price I've paid. Honest? I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut. You've been lying so long you've forgotten what truth feels like. But I remember the real Linda. The one who used to cry over injured birds, who wanted to start a charity for abused women. What would that girl think of who you've become? Silence stretched between us like a crime scene tape, marking off the boundaries of what we'd lost. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, carrying an edge of desperation I'd never heard before. He has everything on record, she whispered. Every lie I told, every deal I helped him close. One move against him and I go down too. 20 years in federal prison, minimum. Is that what you want for me? The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. I thought of the evidence spread before me, each page another nail in Linda's coffin. The story I was pursuing wouldn't just expose Richard Morrison, it would destroy his daughter too. The realization settled over me like a shroud, I couldn't save my friend and serve justice. The choice was binary, absolute, devastating in its simplicity. Maybe prison would be better than the cage you're living in now, I said softly. Her laugh was a broken thing, jagged with years of accumulated pain. You always thought you could save everyone. The eternal crusader, charging in with your banner of truth held high. But some people don't want to be saved, Melissa. Some people just want to survive. The line went dead, leaving me alone with the weight of decisions yet unmade. On my laptop screen, the first paragraphs of my exposé waited, cursor blinking like a judgment. I could almost see the headlines, feel the shockwaves that would ripple through the business world. The story would make my career, and unmake everything else. Josh touched my shoulder gently. You okay? I stared at the evidence before us, each page representing another choice Linda had made, another step deeper into darkness. I need to change the angle, I said slowly, revelation blooming like a bruise. This isn't just about corporate corruption. It's about how evil spreads, not through grand gestures, but through small compromises. Through the choices we make when we think we have no choice at all. That's still going to destroy her, Josh warned. No, I replied, fingers moving to the keyboard with newfound purpose. It might just save her. Sometimes the only way out of a trap is to spring it yourself. The city lights flickered beyond the conference room windows, each one representing another life touched by Morrison Enterprises' corruption. Somewhere out there, Linda sat in her tower of glass and steel, surrounded by the trappings of success, imprisoned by her own choices. I began to type, weighing each word like ammunition. This is a story about power, not just the power to build empires, but the power to corrupt souls. It begins with a little girl who wanted her father's love, and ends with a woman who sold her conscience for his approval. Power reshapes us in ways we never anticipate, carving new angles into our souls until we barely recognize our own reflection. Sitting in my darkened apartment, surrounded by the ghostly glow of laptop screens and scattered documents, I felt that transformation crystallizing within me. Each piece of evidence against the Morrisons was another weight added to the scales of judgment, tipping me further from the person I'd been toward someone harder, someone capable of necessary cruelties. The first draft of my article lay before me, its words sharp as broken glass. Josh had called it brilliant but brutal, a surgical dissection of how corruption flows through family lines like poisoned blood. But something about it felt incomplete, a symphony missing its final movement. You're making a mistake, Linda's voice rasped through my phone, breaking the midnight silence. She'd been crying, I could hear it in the ragged edges of her breath. If you publish this, there's no going back. No redemption. No forgiveness. I'm not looking for forgiveness, I replied, surprised by the steel in my own voice. I'm looking for justice. Justice? The word emerged as a bitter laugh. You think exposing us will bring justice? Do you have any idea how many lives depend on this company? How many families will be destroyed when it all comes crashing down? The question hit like a physical blow, forcing me to confront the full weight of what I was about to unleash. But beneath Linda's concern for others, I heard something else, the desperate rationalization of someone who'd spent too long justifying their own corruption. Tell me something, I said, fingers hovering over my keyboard. When did it happen? When did you stop being the girl who wanted to change the world and become someone who helps destroy it instead? Silence stretched between us, heavy with 20 years of shared history now crumbling into dust. When she finally spoke, her voice carried an unexpected vulnerability that cracked my hardened resolve. It wasn't one moment, she whispered. It was 1,000 tiny choices. Each one so small it barely registered. Sign this document. Look the other way on that deal. Trust that dad knows best. By the time I realized what I'd become, I was in too deep to claw my way back out. My screen flickered with new emails from Josh, more evidence, more damning connections. But suddenly the story I'd been crafting felt wrong, incomplete. I'd been so focused on exposing the corruption that I'd missed the more profound tragedy, how good people become complicit in evil, one compromise at a time. What if there was another way? I asked, an idea taking shape like dawn breaking through storm clouds. What if instead of just exposing the crimes, we tell the true story, about power, and corruption, and the price of staying silent? You want me to be your cautionary tale? Bitterness crept back into her tone. I want you to be brave, I countered. To finally break free from his control. Think about it, if you come forward voluntarily, tell your side. He'll destroy me. He's already destroying you. I can hear it in your voice. See it in your eyes every time you have to defend his actions. You're dying by inches, Linda, and you know it. The silence that followed felt different, charged with possibility rather than defeat. I could almost see her in her perfect office, staring out at the city lights, weighing 2 decades of choices against the chance for redemption. How would it work? She finally asked, her voice barely audible. My heart raced as I outlined the plan forming in my mind. Not just an exposé, but a narrative of corruption's insidious spread, told through the eyes of someone who'd lived it, who'd been both victim and enabler. A story that could bring down Richard Morrison while offering his daughter a path to redemption. It won't be easy, I warned. You'll have to tell everything. Every deal, every cover-up, every lie. And you'll still face consequences. Better than living with this weight forever. She drew a shaking breath. But I need time. To gather documents, to protect certain people. You have until tomorrow night, I said firmly, knowing we couldn't risk word getting back to Richard. Then I start publishing with or without your input. After she hung up, I sat in the darkness, letting the magnitude of what I'd set in motion wash over me. The story I'd been pursuing had transformed, becoming something both more complex and more human, a tale not just of corruption exposed, but of redemption offered and perhaps, finally, embraced. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, parking garage. Level B2. Now. Come alone. The old me would have been terrified. But I'd moved beyond fear into something colder, more focused. I grabbed my recorder and backup drive, checking that my encrypted cloud uploads were complete. If this was a trap, at least the truth wouldn't die with me. The elevator descended into the garage's shadows like a diver sinking into dark waters. Each step echoed off concrete walls, counting down to a moment that would change everything, for better or worse. Darkness has its own gravity, a pull that transforms familiar spaces into territories of shadow and uncertainty. The parking garage stretched before me like a concrete canyon, each flickering fluorescent light marking another threshold between what was and what would be. My footsteps echoed off bare walls, each sound a reminder that I was walking into what could easily be a trap. The figure waiting in the shadows wasn't Linda. Richard Morrison's tall frame emerged into the dim light, his expensive suit incongruous in this subterranean space. The predatory grace I remembered from my teenage years had aged into something more refined but no less dangerous. "You've caused quite a stir, Melissa," he said, his voice carrying that same smooth authority that had once made him seem invincible to a teenage girl's eyes. "Though I must admit, I'm disappointed. I thought you were smarter than this." "Smart enough to have insurance," I replied, forcing steel into my voice. "Everything I've uncovered is already uploaded. If anything happens to me dash." His laugh cut through the garage like a blade. "Always so dramatic. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to make you an offer." He reached into his jacket, producing a manila envelope thick with possibility. "Your career has been challenging lately. One big story could change everything. I'm offering you that story, exclusive access to Morrison Enterprises' upcoming merger. It's the kind of peace that makes careers." The envelope hung between us like a test, like every compromise that had led Linda down her path of corruption. I could almost see her younger self standing in my place, facing the same silken temptation. "You're offering a bribe," I said flatly. "I'm offering an opportunity. The same one I offered Linda years ago. The choice between struggling with your principles and thriving in the real world." His smile carried decades of victories. "She made the smart choice. She made the choice you groomed her to make. Trained her like one of your hunting dogs, didn't you? Each compromise a treat, each moral sacrifice a pat on the head, until she forgot how to live without your approval." Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, not anger, but the cold calculation of a predator reassessing its prey. "You sound like someone who's made their choice." "I have." The words emerged stronger than I expected. "But so has Linda." Movement whispered behind him. Linda stepped out of the shadows, her designer heels clicking against concrete, her phone recording everything. The mask of corporate confidence she'd worn for so long had cracked, revealing something raw and real beneath. "Hello, Dad," she said softly. The change in Richard Morrison was subtle but profound, a microscopic shift in posture, a tightening around the eyes. For the first time, I saw uncertainty crack his perfect facade. "Linda, what are you doing? What you taught me." Her laugh carried 2 decades of pain. "Playing the game. Making strategic choices. Isn't that what you always said? That sentiment is for the weak." She moved to stand beside me, and in that moment I saw what had truly brought us to this place, not just corruption or greed, but the devastating power of a father's conditional love. "Everything's already filed," I told him, watching the realization spread across his face. "Not just the financial crimes, but the whole story. How you groomed your own daughter into becoming your accomplice. How you used her guilt, her love, her desperate need for approval to bind her to your corruption. You ungrateful dash." He took a step forward, mask slipping to reveal the rage beneath. "Don't." Linda's voice cracked like a whip. "Every word of this conversation is being recorded. Take one more step and assault charges will be the least of your worries." The silence that followed felt like a seismic shift, the moment when power finally changed hands. Richard Morrison stood frozen, watching decades of careful manipulation crumble before his eyes. "You'll destroy everything," he said finally. "The company, your future, our family dash." "You destroyed our family years ago," Linda cut in. "I was just too blind to see it. Or maybe too scared to admit it. But I'm not scared anymore." She turned to me, tears cutting tracks through her perfect makeup. "The documents you need are in your inbox. Everything, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the evidence of how he forced me to participate. Use it all." "Linda, please dash." Richard's voice had lost its authority, revealing something almost human underneath. "Goodbye, Dad." She straightened her spine, reclaiming pieces of herself with each word. For what it's worth, I hope you get help in prison. Real help, not just another performance for the parole board. We walked out together, leaving Richard Morrison standing in the shadows of his crumbling empire. The night air hit us like a wake-up call, carrying the scent of rain and possibility. What happens now? Linda asked softly. Now. I looked at her, really looked at her, seeing both the scared teenager she'd been and the stronger woman she was becoming. Now we tell the truth. All of it. And then you start rebuilding, not an empire this time, but something real. Something yours. She nodded, tears falling freely now. Will you help me? Tell the story right. That's what friends do, I replied, feeling the weight of both victory and responsibility settling around us. They help each other find their way back to the light. Above us, storm clouds parted, revealing stars that had been there all along, waiting to be seen. Sometimes salvation comes not in grand gestures but in small choices, in the courage to face our own darkness and choose, finally and irrevocably, to step into the light. My phone buzzed, Josh, confirming receipt of Linda's documents. Tomorrow, the story would break like a tidal wave, washing away decades of corruption. But tonight was for healing, for two friends finding their way back to truth, one painful step at a time. Some victories carry the weight of loss within them. But as I watched Linda straighten her shoulders and face the future, I understood that sometimes the greatest triumph lies not in avoiding the fall, but in choosing, at last, to rise.